Good morning, guys. Let's see.
Good morning.
So I don't have a PowerPoint to share with you guys to go for this morning. I don't know if Tyler, if you have one that you want to pull up. Otherwise, we can just play it by ear and go from there. We can go around the room and kind of talk about different commercial properties that we have listed right now that we kind of want to bring awareness to, and different wants and needs, and maybe go to open forum. Does that sound good for you guys, or?
But we are going to start with our guest speaker today, who is Kevin Brown from the Norwich Community Development Corporation. And Kevin, we're really glad that you were able to make time for us today. And congratulations on your position. I know we've invited you to talk to the realtors before. We had a conference, I don't know, 3 years ago when you were with Mohegan Sun, right?
Right.
So welcome back in your
Down in the
new role.
ballroom.
That's right. So welcome back. It's very nice to see you. And please go ahead and share anything you want about what's going on in Norwich.
Great, thank you. Well, I was kind of motivated by Kim's opening there. I thought I was going to be able to just sit back and listen to all the properties that are out there and take notes, because really I think that's kind of my role currently here at NCDC. For those of you that I've not met or don't know me, as Susie said, I was chairman of the Mohegan Tribe and Mohegan Gaming before coming here to the Norwich Community Development Corporation. I took over on or about the 6th of July, so I'm 90 days in, so I'm just about to lose beginner status here in this job, and that feels good, actually. I can actually get through the elevator pitch about Norwich pretty smoothly now without stuttering, and I think that that's a good lead-in for this conversation. You know, I've got a cartoon book sitting here on my desk that I found in the basement of the building that I'm in here. We're at 66 Franklin, which is the old Bulletin building. I actually delivered the Bulletin as a kid. I used to drop off my collection money here to Mr. Coletti. And so it's kind of odd to come full circle and be back here. The book that I found in the basement is a collection of editorial cartoons about Norwich by a fellow named Doug McGregor, whose cartoons were in the Bulletin for a long time. And it's both saddening and encouraging at the same time, because this is a bound book of cartoons with dates on them like 1986 to 1989. And as you read them, fortunately or unfortunately, many of the things are still true about how we approach economic development here in Norwich. And so, you know, on the one hand, that's daunting for me. On the other, it's giving me the impetus to say, let's not be like that anymore. Let's knock some barriers down. Let's do some things and let's improve some things. I'm fortunate to have stepped in behind a couple of folks, Bob Mills and Jason Vincent, who were doing exactly that. And I don't want there to be any mistake made about those 1986 cartoons and the efforts of the 2000 teens, whereby the downtown bond program really did start to move the needle on occupying vacant space here in the downtown area. And we're going to continue that work, and we're going to expand it out to include the whole city. And what makes it possible for us to do that, as you all are probably very aware, is the infusion of money through the American Rescue Plan. Those ARPA funds have been allocated, at least Norwich's component part of those funds has been allocated to 10 or 11 different programs throughout the city. And the funds that affect NCDC, and then therefore this conversation, are the $2 million that were allocated to us by the City Council to move forward with the same programs that the Downtown Bond program formerly addressed. Now, there will be some changes, and we're currently in the process of refining the rule set, how you qualify, how we prioritize the efforts, and where we want to put those monies to make improvements in the downtown and across Norwich. And I expect that rule set will be in place by the end of this calendar year. And we will be aggressively then going out after the turn of the year and making improvements across the city. Now, the old downtown bond program, to either remind you if you're familiar with it or to let you know, had three major components to it. There was the code correction program, whereby a landlord would make improvements to their property. They would certify the code corrections they had made: plumbing, heating, air conditioning, fire, ADA accessible bathrooms, lifts for the second and third floors, those kinds of things. And then the city of Norwich, we cut a check for a 50% rebate of those costs. That was the code correction program. The lease rebate program provided an incentive for retail tenants that would abate their lease in a sunsetting form or fashion over 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. And the revolving loan program that provided access to capital at a low 2 to 3% interest rate through NCDC in concert with Eastern Savings Bank. Those are the three components of the old downtown bond program. The federal money, and those were bonded monies, city taxpayer monies, bonded by the city. The federal monies that we've received currently are approved only for re-execution of that code correction component of the old downtown bond program, and what you may have heard of described as the vanilla box program. The vanilla box program is essentially code correction plus. It not only will bring the facility up to standard in terms of code requirements, but it will then go the next level and provide basic flooring, windows, drywall and paint, lighting, and maybe some other marginal improvements to the facility, with the idea to make it move-in ready and entice landlords to want to be involved in this program to create that move-in ready space, and then therefore entice tenants to want to move in to that move-in ready space and do their own improvements from a furniture, fixtures, and equipment standpoint after they've signed their lease and decided to move in. So those are the two parts of the program that we are excited about rolling out here over the next 60 to 90 days.
Are those loan programs or grant programs?
Those are grants. Those are grant programs. And as I said, the former downtown bond program did have a revolving loan program. Currently, we are not looking at reinstituting that program. That said, we do still have capital from the downtown bond program that, although the downtown bond program ceased to exist in name on April 30th of this year, those funds still exist. So we've got the ability to provide small loans to businesses that need 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 to get some working capital, to get over a flood issue from these past few weeks, those kinds of things. So we've got that ability to continue the revolving loan program with those nominal funds that still reside in that program. So that's what's going on from an ARP standpoint. Got a few other things to talk about, but let me stop there and see if you have questions about that.
Is there a limit to the grant program that's still available? A cap?
I'm sorry, is there a
cap on the amount of the grant that you could receive?
There is. So the resolution that the city council passed provided us $2 million to spend, but said that no one project could take on any more than $300,000. Additionally, there was a stipulation or qualification on our use of those funds that said 400,000 of it must be carved out to go to micro businesses or home-based businesses, and that aggregate amount is $400,000 that has to be committed to those type of businesses.
Kevin, is the vanilla box still compensating town compensating 50% towards that, or how much money would an applicant get in the grant?
Yeah, that's a tough question for me to answer today for you, Jack. We are, the vanilla box has been philosophically rolled out and somewhat understood around here. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what was intended from it and through it. And that's what I'm going to spend the next month or two making sure we tighten up and can roll out cleanly to everyone. Now, that was a caveat to tell you that I don't know is the answer. But let me go ahead and just sort of forecast a little bit how I see this playing out. And I've already tested this on a few different landlords and left them, with the open-ended, it could be either way, and I'll get back to you just to try to get an idea how folks feel about it. There's two ways that I think we're going to approach this. One is the 50% rebate. go fix your property, make it move-in ready, certify your costs, give them to us in your application, and we will rebate you 50% of those funds. One direction. The other direction is you sublease, landlord, you sublease to NCDC for $1 that property. We will acquire the GC, we will do the work, and we will acquire a tenant. And then we will hold that $1 sublease for the period of time that it takes for us to recoup all of the costs that we put into that project, at which point we're out and you are now leasing to that tenant that we went out and acquired by getting that work done. That
Wait,
was a
can
little
I
bit
stop you there for a second? So are we talking about, let's say you had an office building that had, owner occupied with a couple of tenant spaces. Would that apply to that, where like the couple of tenant spaces you hold for the $1 or
Yes.
one tenant space, or, I mean, like, help me understand that.
Everything you just said, yes, those are both potential approaches. I'm going to caveat once again, right? I'm testing this on you guys. I'm testing this on this audience and letting you know that that is what we are considering, but that we haven't yet tightened up the rule set. So this conversation can be two-way. You can help inform me how you feel about that, how you think it might work, how you think it might not work, and we're going to go from there. But Susie, both of those scenarios, lease out one, lease out both, are ways that we're looking at.
Interesting.
That sounds like a pretty appealing
Yeah.
program, Kevin. Are there caps on rent or restrictions on the income level of tenants? Anything of that sort?
Not currently, Chris, but those are all things that we're going to be taking into consideration as we look at the universe of potential applicants and projects. We're going to have to prioritize them in some way and by some metrics, and return on the investment, and the rate of rental and those kinds of things, the cash flow, are all going to come into play as we pick up. Look, I sense that we're going to get a list longer than our $2 million arm that we have, right? We may not be able to service all comers in this thing, and so we'll have to draw a cut line. And it's the kinds of things you described and a few others that we just frankly haven't sat down and formulated yet that are going to be involved in making those choices.
Can we access some of that information online anywhere, or?
Not yet, not yet.
Not yet.
I'm
Okay.
literally sitting down next week. As a matter of fact, it's on my calendar in front of me. I've got 3 days of workshopping with a couple of different people where we're going to kick this around and make sure that we can ultimately do exactly what you asked, and really roll out a solicitation so that I'm not sitting here watching, doing first come, first serve for anybody who walks in the door. Next person in, ask me for $12,000, boom, they get it, out they go. And it doesn't really help us prioritize the project. So my goal is for us to tighten this conversation up, roll it out, essentially use that as a solicitation to say, all right, come in and make your applications, and then we can go about the process of choosing the most worthy projects or the most impactful projects across Norwich.
Well, it seems like has a great deal of promise to the program.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The hard part is the hard part, and that is and that's we don't have here in NCDC. There is not. I can't throw an eraser and hit the general contract. We don't have that. So part of this process is I'm going to have to probably formulate for probably nothing. We are going to formulate an RFP, RFQ to get someone to sign on and be our general contractor. If we decide to even move down that path, it's a great thing, but it's going to be difficult, and we're going to have to really work through deciding whether or not we can do it that much more complex, although much more appealing way. The simplest way for us obviously would be, hey, all you landlords out there in the universe, go fix your properties and come back and we'll give you a 50% rebate. That would be the easiest path for us at NCDC. We might end up having to go that route, but we are going to make sure that we test this other more complex route and make sure that we can do it before we roll it out.
Well, that's interesting. And we've got one general contractor on the call with us, John Lombardi. Thank you for being online. Does that interest you at all? And are you looking at having one contractor as part of the team that would help figure out what the costs are per
Yeah,
project?
that is currently the plan. Yes.
Okay, very interesting. Definitely thinking outside of the vanilla box.
Yeah.
Kevin, I have a question.
Yes, Bill.
On you talk about it, say 50% of a rebate, say go to the AC plumbing and heating, such like correction. Is it have a time, say to hold the property, or the owner can be sold it and transfer the name to next buyer? And how long gonna be hold it?
That's an interesting question, Bill. Hadn't thought through that. Don't really have an answer, but I understand why you're asking. I'll have to give that some consideration.
Thank you.
Another question about that, some of these properties that, need extensive repair are over-evaluated for tax purposes. So let's say ECAR wanted to buy a headquarters in downtown Norwich, and the taxes on a building with a couple of rental spaces are 25,000. We'll just put that out there, which is a lot of money for, let's say, 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. When the property is going for $400,000 or $500,000. So is that in your toolbox, or can you speak to that at all?
The tax abatement approach is certainly something that we can consider, that we haven't rolled into this ARP conversation directly. We haven't made that connection, but it certainly can be a part of the conversation.
I think it really needs to be.
There's no question, and you're not the first one in the last 12 hours to make the point to me. Considering I slept for 8 of those last 12 hours, this is certainly a topic of great interest. No question about it.
You got a tough role ahead of you, Kevin. Applaud you for taking it.
That's okay. It's all good. So if there are no other questions about ARP, just briefly, I can cover a couple of things that are going on. Well, but first, let me just say that the knock-on effect, the second order effect of these ARP funds being allocated to NCDC is that I have received inbound inquiries from, I'll say, a number of downtown and all of Norwich landlords whose interest has been piqued. And so that's a good thing in terms of the development and revitalization of the city. And some of you folks have a deeper understanding and a longer running relationship with some of these landlords, but I think what I'm saying when I say that folks are popping their head up who maybe were silent or dormant for a little while. So that's a good thing, and hopefully we can make some good moves based on all of this. The other two things that are sort of happening in our NCDC world that are really, really long-term and out there kinds of things that may or may not be of interest to you immediately is Business Park North out at Exit 18 in Occam. The city recently bonded $740,000 to allow us to continue the work, the permitting, the wetland surveys, and some of the architectural assessments and renderings to reorient the exit and entrance ramps around that cloverleaf up there off of 395 and allow us to gain road access and infrastructure up through the Byron Brooks farm area for the development of a business park up there. This is probably a 5 to 7 year timeline or planning horizon that we're talking about here. But as you adjust your planning horizons and think about the impacts of that, certainly there's the possibility that could create jobs and then therefore residential requirements out there in that area or throughout the town. That's really about as far as I can take the Business Park North conversation here today. And then finally, and this one's a bit unscoped, I guess. But the cannabis industry is coming to the state of Connecticut. And I can tell you that I have kind of like my quip earlier about, inbound inquiries over the last 12 hours, 8 of them spent sleeping. I've probably had inbound inquiries over the last 12 hours about cannabis, some of them while I was sleeping. So there is a great deal of interest in the industry, and that interest is obviously at least somewhat piqued by the fact that Norwich is identified as a disproportionately affected area. That's the term. Norwich and 30 other communities throughout the state of Connecticut have been identified as disproportionately affected communities, and therefore have a leg up in terms of ownership and initiation of a grow facility, a retail facility, a transportation business, anything associated with any of the verticals in cannabis. Norwich residents can access the social equity approach to gaining a license ahead of those who are not in one of these disproportionately affected communities. So that tag, simply put, that tag has created interest. Now, for any of you who might bump into anyone who's asking those cannabis questions, it's important to note that the disproportionately affected community and the bubble that the drawn bubble that it has been created by it, you can find it on the Social Equity Council's website. Sorry, I can't, read it out for you, but a quick Google, you'll find your way there. Does not mean that development can only occur inside of that disproportionately affected area. Development can occur within the entire city of Norwich, even though the entire city of Norwich is not part of that disproportionately affected area. Norwich Town is cut out of that. The Ockham area is cut out of that, and one other sub-tract of Norwich is cut out of that. I can't think of which one it is right off the top of my head. But you should be aware and careful that if anyone asks you about developing a grow or cultivation facility in Norwich, that they don't think it has to land inside of that bubble. That's the only point I wanted to make clear to everybody here today. That has more to do with the individuals that are pursuing the social equity license and nothing to do with where the facility actually lands.
Can you I'm sorry, can you define what this Social Equity Council stuff is about in terms of either growing or selling it, like having a retail store? And I think there's like a concern amongst the communities about having a retail store and the impact that will have on the community.
Yeah, so I knew I shouldn't have opened up this conversation because of questions like this. So that's why I said this is really, sort of prospectively speaking, right? There are a lot of things that have to be addressed, determined, and decided by the public and by the political bodies of the city of Norwich. Until and unless those conversations are complete, none of what I just said matters. But what I wanted to make sure was that you were aware of this is where things are moving right now, and that there is interest, inbound interest in the city of Norwich, which doesn't mean that any of it's going to happen. But as the folks that field these queries on the commercial real estate side, you should know that you should let me know so we can at least frame the conversation appropriately. I'll try to take another stab, Susie, at the social equity thing, but then, I'm quickly in the deep end of the pool and I can just point you at the website, right? And the fact of the matter is, and I don't mean this to sound disparaging, but I don't know that the Social Equity Council even fully understands what it means just yet. This all rolled out very quickly. They were supposed to have formed the Social Equity Council by August 31st. I don't think they even named a chairman for it until mid-September, and I think they may have had their first meeting a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot going on to really get legs under this whole thing. And I think that the safest thing I can do at this point is just encourage you to go to the website, find it, scope it out, learn as much as you can about it. But to answer the root question, the whole social equity approach is intended to recognize that there are individuals in our communities who were disproportionately affected, that were arrested, that remained unemployed because they had a violation of some kind that had to do with cannabis. And now that the state has has decided to legalize it, it's a bit of a expungement approach to say, hey, listen, we made some mistakes. We've now decided this is legal. Therefore, what we're going to try to do is make sure that the industry does whatever it can to generate opportunity for those of you who live in an area where the crime rate was up or the unemployment rate was up because of things associated with or affiliated with any past crimes.
Wow, that is one interesting conversation.
Yeah.
A question.
I know.
This is
Go ahead,
Norm. My question is since Connecticut has established that we can sell cannabis here, and the whole drive behind it is to tax it in some form, we all know that. Have we forgotten the problems that Colorado had? They were the first state to open it up. They figured it would bring in tons of money. For every $1 million I've been told Colorado brings in, it costs them $4 million to correct the problems. Whether it be addiction, whether it be accidents, whether it be this, whether it be that. We just have to look at Colorado. Human beings are human beings, wherever the heck they are. I think that anybody, and I'm not in a position to change anything, but anybody who decides that cannabis is a good idea, I really rather rethink what they're going on, because the money you're going to get is going to not be anything compared to the problems you're going to bring. This is a personal opinion. But I know it's going to go forward. I know they want to do it. And money is behind everything. That's the fuel that we use today, money. It's not oil or gas or electric. It's money. And I think it's a big mistake going forward, because every city that's going to have these little stores opening up, and this is not my personal opinion, you're going to get people who will become addicted. And once they become addicted, they're not going to be working. They're going to be on the streets. They're going to be overdosing. The negative to this stuff is certainly much greater, in my personal opinion, than any positive any city can get. Norwich is a city that needs to grow. It's not growing, it's dying, just like New London, just like Hartford. Any other cities all have serious problems. And the problems come from the people who live there. They're not educated. They're not inclined to work. It's easier to get free money. And when you get, it's one thing to be high on a 6-pack of beer. It's another thing to be high on drugs every single day. It's a personal opinion. I think they're making a big mistake, and I just want to voice my opinion on that. And I thank you for bringing it up. I also congratulate you for taking the job. You've taken on one hell of a job in Norwich.
Thanks, Norman. And I'll just respond to your statement by saying I came into this conversation completely agnostic. I'm just approaching it from an economic development standpoint to make sure that you understand that the queries are coming in. Decisions will be made by the public and the politicians. And I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same ground for what's happening right now. We could have a long conversation about the rest of that.
Yeah, that debate's already been had.
We understand what you're saying. We understand the decision will be made. There's no question about it. Once the snowball goes down the hill, it's going to gather momentum and it's going to be approved. You know that, and I know that. Just wanted to voice opinion at this point that you're doing what you can do in the new job, and I congratulate you on the job. I think you do a great job in every problem that they're going to throw your way, and you're going to get a ton of them. But for what we know about you, you're capable of handling. So congratulations.
Thanks.
But Kevin, back to that conversation about the cannabis, just so everybody here understands where this stands. Somebody can apply for a license to sell or grow cannabis in Norwich at this moment. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Okay.
Because this city has not positioned itself yet. You may have seen, and I haven't paid super close attention to it, but city by city, municipality by municipality, some towns have put a moratorium on the idea. Others have aggressively pursued. Others have remained silent. And
So Norwich has not made up their mind yet.
Norwich is just currently silent. So that's, now here
Okay.
I go, caveat one more time. I'm just trying to, prospectively look at the conversation that we're going to end up having to make sure that we're at least sharing what we know about it right now.
Is there any projected date for when they would know, just so that these commercial practitioners who may know someone selling or buying a farm or retail space?
Right. What day is the election?
November.
November 2nd, I think. So maybe November 3rd, the conversation would start. I'm being flipped, but I think you're a point, which is, I don't think anybody wants to jump on that political football right now in the middle of campaign season. And I don't blame them for that. This is a very important matter that's going to require deep and thorough conversation and consideration. And, why would you do that in the midst of what's a current and impending election period? It's fair. It's fair that that's the approach. And I think we should all just kind of stand by and wait and see when or if that conversation is going to happen here in Norwich. Now, just one other thing, and I think some of you all already know this, but it was briefly mentioned. Norwich is a city of roughly 50,000. I think the number is 48 or 49 right now. And the regulations stipulate that there can only be one retail facility per 25,000 residents. And so depending upon how you do the math from a round up, round down standpoint, you could say there could only be one retail facility. I think those decisions have been made that there's sort of a roundup rule and that Norwich would qualify for 2 retail facilities. Now, the political decisions might say, hey, to Norm's point, we don't want retail facilities in the city of Norwich. It just doesn't mesh. It doesn't fit with our current demographic situation or otherwise, or just net public benefit to the community. But that doesn't mean that Norwich couldn't strategically consider positioning a grow facility where we're not retailing it. However, it is still producing a tax return to the city, and it's getting on transportation trucks, and it's being sent off to other municipalities in the state where retail facilities exist. It's just another approach, perhaps, that might come to play. But look, at this point, I'm 10 steps out in front of anything that really has been considered.
Very interesting.
I don't think the police have any useful tools at this point in time to ascertain whether someone is driving while high on marijuana.
It is one of the considerations I know that's been kicked around. At this moment,
I think that would have to be required sort of prerequisite before.
I think that I may have inadvertently started a listening session about cannabis in Norwich, and that was not my intent. But again, I just, the reason for even bringing it up, I want to make sure I double back all the way to the beginning. Folks are calling. In industry, I would categorize it as everybody from a guy who grew a pot plant once back in 1970 to a current multi-state operator who has licenses in other jurisdictions and sees the potential in Connecticut, and everybody in between. So that's all I really wanted to put on your radar, so that you know that there are folks out there that are ringing the phone. Whether or not it can ever happen or will ever happen in Norwich, who knows?
Very good. How are things going in your perspective with either casino and as it relates to Norwich and the economy?
Well, things are going well. I mean, you can see the quarterly reports, and quarterly slot revenue this past quarter was almost back to what it was. COVID was an aberration. Take COVID out of the picture, do a year-over-year analysis with 2 years ago rather than last year, and revenues are almost back to where they were. So that's a good sign, just in terms of obviously revenue and what that means for the Mohegan Pequot Fund at the state level, and disbursements to all the municipalities from that fund. I haven't followed it closely, haven't had a need to, frankly, but as I understand it, Kathy Austin did propose legislation that would ensure that the local impacted communities, Montville, Ledyard, Preston, Norwich, stood to get a better per capita amount of those monies than what was previously the case for 20 plus years. That's a long time coming. I don't know if that's been passed as a law or that's been approved, but I know that the conversation was active about that. And then from a job standpoint, I saw data recently that the hospitality industry has rebounded. I think it was a positive 17.5% up in terms of jobs back in the hospitality and casino industry. So things
Wow.
are, generally speaking, things are moving back to normal.
That is fantastic news. I'm really glad to hear that. Huh. What about your take on the economy with COVID, commercial, retail? Are you seeing a lot of losses? Are you seeing a pipeline of evictions or foreclosures? Any thoughts that way or knowledge that you want to share?
Yeah, I can't say, Susie, that I've got any real depth of understanding of the situation right now, but anecdotally, a couple of things I can say is that restaurants remain cautious given the Delta variant and its impacts over the past few months, although I think we've all seen that in London County, recent headline, finally has had a significant reduction in the number of COVID cases and a bit of an increase in vaccines. And so I'm hopeful that this Friday, if we just speak to Norwich, I'm hopeful that this Friday, that's when the city manager will reassess the mask mandate for Norwich. And I remain hopeful that he will not extend it and that it will be over at that point. I don't know. I'm just hopeful that that's the case, given the data that we've seen. And if and when that happens, the importance of that to this conversation is if and when that happens, I think you'll begin to feel a little bit of traction and hope in the restaurant and service industries that things can get back to normal for them, for those small businesses that are providing services and restaurant opportunities to the public. I would double all the way back to the first thing I talked about, the ARP funds, and say that although I want to take a deliberate approach over the next couple of months to how we're going to allocate these ARP funds, I am proud to say that we did get a one-off out of the box very quickly for a young man who opened a barbershop up in Taft. And it's just a great vignette for what those ARP monies are intended to be used for. Because when you talk about business closures and small businesses, what segment was impacted the most? The service industry. What are service industries? Salons, barbershops, and spas. And so here's a young fella. He's an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. He's got a young family with a wife and a baby born during the pandemic. He was a barber. He didn't have a job. And what did they decide to do? Build their own barbershop. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better example of someone who, dug in and tried to dig themselves out of the hole and do it on their own. And they put skin in the game. They put their own money and time into refurbing what was a dilapidated retail storefront. And I was with them all along the way, just kind of keeping track of what they were doing. I was amazed at the work that they completed. And so shortly after the city council approved the $2 million, I looked at our team, I looked at our board, and I said, look, we can go slow to do it right in the aggregate for this $2 million to make sure we prioritize, but this one's obvious. And so we were able to give them a rebate on some of those costs that they put in, some of that pocket money of their own that they put into building that barbershop. And I'm proud that we were able to make that difference. And I hope it's an example of what we're going to be able to do going forward.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
Kevin, I have one quick question. Do you foresee any long-term impact on the city of Norwich as far as the supply chain crisis that the country's going through?
Good question.
It's a great question. And honestly, Chris, I'd be reaching if I tried to answer that. I learned how to build helicopters. I learned how to fight wars. I learned how to develop casinos, and I'm working on helping build small businesses. And while I understand the impact of that supply chain problem on small businessmen and women, I don't know. I don't know the macroeconomic approach to that question. I think we all see it and recognize that it's got to change, and then, you know, we can all sort of pitch our own opinions about it. One of which I would say is we've got to get back to maybe some Connecticut roots of the value of manufacturing here in the U.S. and leveraging this state as a manufacturer of our own goods to help limit those supply chain issues that we experienced through the pandemic. And I think that we're postured to do that. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I feel like every minute that goes by that I don't read it, I'm getting further and further behind. Governor Lamont released a program yesterday about an innovation corridor and a regional community challenge, and I think that buried in that is, you know, the implicit understanding that we've got to fix the problem that you raised with your question. Let's invest in manufacturing and job training here in Connecticut, and then I could get parochial and say Eastern Connecticut, and I could even more parochial and say in Norwich, Connecticut, to help again address the problem that you raised.
I would tend to agree with you.
And Chris, on as it relates to housing, and this may not be good news, but it's no surprise that inflation is happening. Lawrence Yun from the National Association of Realtors, he's our chief economist, says inflation is going to continue. It's at 5%. It's going to drive higher interest rates. That will help soften the market. So from a housing perspective, the market is going to soften. More inventory is going to come on the market because some people are priced right out of being able to buy a home. So good from a residential housing standpoint. But yes, I don't know if you saw in the news the other day that the expected rate of increase is 40% just on energy alone. And when gas goes up to $4, that's where we were around 2008. So
Yeah, I did
not
see
all
that.
good news, but
Yeah, propane also.
well, a lot to think about. Kevin, I would like to speak with you offline. ECAR as an association, we've been looking for a new headquarters. And Norwich is generally speaking our middle ground because we cover the shoreline right up to Brooklyn, so the entire eastern part of the state. And I would really like to talk to you to get incentivized about choosing Norwich. So
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm all about it. I've already got one space in mind, but we can investigate the possibilities, which could include, you know, refurbishment of a currently unused space under the program, right?
perfect.
Excellent.
Let me give you my cell phone number right now, 860-652-5445. And please call me when you get a moment.
All right, great. It won't be today because today is my anniversary, and shortly after this and one other mandated event, I'm going to evaporate and take care of business.
Very good. Happy anniversary.
Thanks very much.
If there are no further questions for Kevin, we will release him to the rest of his day and his anniversary plans.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing you guys. Hi,
You
Cassie.
too.
Yeah,
Hi, Molly, if you're still out there. Hi, Bill. Hi, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was terrific. Very interesting.